Thank you so much for your patience. It's well worth the wait. You're really in for a treat tonight. My name's Paul, and I'm with the Albany Library. And tonight, in conjunction with Albany Film Fest, made possible by the Friends of the Albany Library, we're proud to present Real Boy. And as many of you already know, we have the filmmaker Shaleece Haas, who will be in discussion with you all and answering questions after the film. So, Shaleece teaches video storytelling at the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism, the Berkeley Advanced Media Institute, and the New York Press Association. She has also worked as an editorial photographer and radio producer, and was a founding staff member of the National Oral History Project StoryCorps. She's a graduate of the documentary film program at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. Please join me in welcoming Shaleece.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Albany Library and the Albany Film Festival. It's really a delight to be here. I live just down the street in Oakland, and so being able to be here for a local screening is really special. Also, Andrew Gersh, our editor from Berkeley, is here, and he'll be joining us also afterwards. So I just want to thank all of you for coming out this evening, for joining us for this screening, and we'll be here to have a conversation with you afterwards, so hopefully you can stick around for a few minutes and talk to us. But thanks for being here. Enjoy.
Okay, so I don't know if you wanted to say a few words or if you want to just launch right into questions, and does that work?
Yeah. I'm happy to hear whatever anyone has to say or any questions. We're happy to be here. Oh, goodness.
I'm interested about the genesis of the project. How did you all come into Ben's life, or vice versa?
Yeah, I met Bennett through Joe, who's in the film. I was a huge fan of Coyote Grace and Joe's music, and I was sort of connected to him through friends of friends, and was at a living room concert up in Sacramento in the house that you see in the film. And Bennett and Joe had just met at a conference for sober young people. And had bonded very quickly over their shared love of music and their experience of addiction. And there weren't very many other trans people there. So Joe had invited Bennett to come up and open that show. And I was not really sure what kind of film I was, I wasn't even really planning to make a film, but was moved by that friendship and asked if I could come and interview them on camera, and they said yes, and 4 years later, we had a film.
Easy as that.
Yeah, exactly. Just like that.
In the back? No?
I'm a fourth grade teacher.
Okay.
I have two questions. First of all, I was a big Coyote Grace fan as well, and I'm wondering if you know how Joe is doing right now. And my second question is, teaching fourth grade, I'm wondering if you have any digital storytelling resources that you would recommend for the classroom.
That's great. So I saw Joe 2 or 3 weeks ago up in Sacramento. We had a screening, which was really nice that his parents were there and a lot of his community is there. And he's doing really great. He's been traveling a lot with the film, performing. He's actually writing a musical, the lyrics for a musical right now about Albert Cashier, who was a Civil War era soldier who had been who had been assigned female at birth and registered in the Army as a male soldier. And so Joe's collaborating on that musical, and he's singing and performing and touring, and and he talks very candidly about his addiction. One of the things that in this film, I wasn't sure if, I wanted to talk to him about these issues, and was really heartened by the fact that he was incredibly open about his experience. He writes about it in his blog, and had felt that sharing his story and his experience of addiction was a really important part of his own journey. So he talks pretty candidly about it, and he's, it's an ongoing struggle. Yeah. Susie is amazing. I mean, I am so grateful to her for her willingness to be vulnerable throughout this process. And to be really fair to her, I don't know that she knew that what she was getting into. You know.
All about that first shoot.
So I actually met Susie in a strange circumstance where I was down with my first shoot with Bennett in Los Angeles. And he had said, come on down, interview me, but come on this particular weekend because nobody's going to be there. And so we were there. I was there with a camera. And in walked Susie, who had no idea. He hadn't told her I was coming. And she was not terribly excited about it. And there is some footage in the film from that first shoot. And I didn't ask her to sign. I told her she didn't have to sign a release originally because she wasn't super excited to be talking about what was going on in their family on camera. But she did talk to me a bit on that first trip, and then increasingly over the months. And we became very close. And so I think over time it got increasingly more comfortable for her to participate in filming. And she has said, after screening, she said on a number of occasions that this process in some ways was part of her process. That she says she doesn't know how long it might have taken to come around, were it not for me kind of bugging her and saying, great, can we talk about it? Let's talk about it. Why don't we talk about it? And I think also that she really has been able to see through the process of the film that by bearing her own process bare to other people, that it has been helpful to see that we all start somewhere, all of us. So I'm very grateful to her.
We are recording this for YouTube for the KLB station, so it is helpful if you don't mind.
Oh, okay. Congratulations. I laughed, I cried. I'm a wreck right now. It was just really, really a beautiful film. I don't mean to gush, but it really was. One thing I loved that you did with Susie, I wanted to transition off that it would be so easy to demonize the mother, right? Because she at first was so unaccepting, but there's something as a mother myself, it's so hard to watch your kids grow up, and it's so easy to miss that toddler. And what I thought was so great is that you illustrated more the overarching feelings of losing a little kid as opposed to about the transition. And when we talked a while ago, it was a coming of age story. It wasn't a transition story. And I want to congratulate you because you absolutely did that. And the characters, I mean, Bennett is like, I hate to use the word goldmine, but the character himself is he's so open and sweet and funny, and then his friend. And so you really, I love that you had this level of access. So, and you were shooting, you're the DP. So as far as like trust, did it take, I know it took a while with Susie, but what about Bennett and Dylan and your other characters? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, Bennett and Joe and Dylan and I and Susie, actually everyone in the film, but certainly the three of them, we spent a lot of time together and grew very close. I spent a lot of time with everyone with the cameras off. I slept in the back of that van on the road trip. It was me and Joe and Bennett's dog, and Bennett and Joe and me and the dog and my camera gear and their guitars. And so I feel that the opportunity as a documentary filmmaker, I don't really believe in what we call fly-on-the-wall filmmaking. I don't actually think that you can just not pretend you're not there, right? I mean, yes, you sort of train people that you're working with on a film to say, well, don't look right in the camera. But really, my presence, whether I want it to be or not, is in the film. And you may not ever see my face or hear my voice, but I think that the relationship that we all have is hopefully, if it works, well, as a proxy for other people to be there. And I think that those relationships and that intimacy were part of the process of making the film. And it wasn't, a means to an end to making the film. It was just what was, and over a long period of time of spending time together. So, these are people I love. And I think the hardest part about making the film was figuring out, when am I wearing my friend hat and when am I wearing my filmmaker hat? And because honoring that relationship and the people that I feel like I owed them a lot for letting me come in and point a camera at all the little vulnerable parts. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Other questions?
First of all, thank you for that. It was a beautiful thing and touching. As she said, I am a wreck emotionally, but I also want to say to both of you, thank you for picking those vulnerable moments and not giving it a bubble perspective. It is so easy to make the transgender life either this living hell or this beautiful bubble of perfection. And it's true, we can make it look, they're all happy, and I think it's great that you made it real and you let us feel the vulnerability with it through the editing and through the directing, and just thank you. It was beautiful, and thank you for your time and letting us experience his journey with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw a lot of hands up earlier.
Yeah, I have a question about the process. How do you know when to end it? I kind of want to get the next sequel or something, or, at some point you're in an artistic process and you thought it was ending, but it's interesting because the characters are people I'd like to continue to know.
Yeah, that's great. We certainly want you to want to know more rather than... a lot of it was a collaboration with Andy, and I think we knew fairly early on, or I knew fairly early on, that I wasn't interested in telling a story about transition, right? That I was interested in telling a story about family relationships and the evolution of those relationships of both given family and chosen family. For those of you who are filmmakers, the beginnings and the endings are some of the hardest parts. And it took us a while, but I knew very much that the beginning of the film had to be about opening this question about family. So the first thing he says is, I just want to be loved by my family, and for my family it's not as simple as that. It's complicated. And so really we knew the film was over, right, once that arc had completed, once Susie had really come around and that relationship that bond had been returned. Bennett continues his life. Everybody in the film, they're real people living real lives, and this film is only a moment in time as seen through my lens as a filmmaker, isolated into one piece of a story. But I think for me it was that arc, and once that was done, then that story was complete. Yeah, and I think one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about is I am not interested in neat packages, because that's not how my life is. I don't know anybody whose life is wrapped up in a neat bow. And so as much as possible, I felt like I wanted the film to leave you with some sense of satisfaction, that there was an ending of some sort, but that really we just keep going, right? All those relationships keep evolving, and I'm pleased to share. Bennett shares this often after screenings, that his relationship with his dad has improved significantly. They're very close now, and of his own volition, his dad went to some gatherings, some meetings for families of trans youth. And so they're much closer now. And his relationship with his sister is not perfect, and they really still struggle, but she respects his pronouns and his name. And it's also an ongoing process. So, I think you're right. There's sort of endings and also open endings.
Yeah, that being said, previous cuts ended with that last road trip before he had written that song for his mom. But once, and that we were like, it's okay, but and then when we heard that song, we went, oh, maybe has he played that for her yet? No, you should go shoot that.
was that the first time that she heard the song? It's such a powerful way to end the film, and like the emotional climax is so effective.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that scene came about?
Sure, and it was the first time she'd heard it, and I, when I went to film with them, all I knew is that we needed to film with them together, right? That the film needed to end with Bennett and Susie just as it had begun. That relationship sort of opens the film, and it also needed to close the film. And so, I spent some time with them and said, I just want to spend time with you together. And he said, great, well, I've got some, shirts to make for this tour I'm going on. And he'd played her a couple of other songs, but this was the first time she'd heard that song. And I'd heard it on tour with him previously, but she hadn't. So it was pretty, and we had, in earlier cuts of the film, there was some voiceover, from interviews that I'd shot with them near the end, but it felt a little bit like Sunday afternoon special. She was like, it was so powerful, and I had all these feelings, and I was like, So I think, thanks to this guy, we cut those out at the end. Yeah. Oh, do you want the mic?
I'm trying to get my thoughts together. I'm trying to understand how the beginning, the middle, the end occurred. So in the beginning, you were attracted by the relationship of Ben and Joe. And but then it transformed, or you came to see that there was more here. Is that what I'm hearing? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't the transformation of the sexual transformation necessarily, but it was the relationship.
Yeah, I mean,
that was your interest.
For me, because I'm a queer woman, and my community is, full of queer and trans people, it was not something that I set out to, I'm going to make a story about what it's like to be trans. I'm not trans. I couldn't have done that anyway. But that was not the sort of intention about educating or any of that. It was really more, to me, initially, my interest was in this sort of thing about chosen family, that I think we have a long legacy of chosen family in, LGBT community. And also the intersection of music. And for Bennett, he was finding his voice as a musician and as a young man in the world. So he was finding his voice through transition, but he was also finding his voice through music and through this mentorship. And so initially, I thought maybe it's a buddy movie, it's a road movie, it's, some kind of, Joe was also finding his voice, he'd transitioned a decade ago, so that was not really center in his life at that point, but being sober was. And finding his voice as a musician, again, as a sober musician, what do I have to say? How do I say it? I'm not in pain, I don't know how to write music, it was really interesting. So they were both kind of simultaneously finding their voices in new ways. And that struck me. And so I think the film, as it evolved, was really much more about how Susie came into the story, and ultimately, and I know she wishes, initially she was like, well, I'll film with you, but this isn't about me. I just want to be I'm only a little bit, right? Like, I don't want to be a lot in the movie. But, even though we think it's about Bennett, it's really as much about her as anyone else. And so that evolved over the 4 years that it took us to make the film. And of course, Andy and I spent a year in the edit room together figuring out what's the heart of this story, what's the core of the story, and how do we interweave all of the relationships, Bennett and Joe, Bennett and Dylan, Susie, Bennett and Susie, but also Susie's mentorship, relationship with Dylan's mom. You get to see all three moms. And so all of that was a crafting that happened over time, that really started with that seed and kind of changed and grew as the relationships evolved. So, yeah.
So I've been following the film since like 3 years ago when y'all were at tabling at Gender Spectrum, and I was just like, this seems kind of cool. You have guitar picks, I'll pick one up. And then I was at Gender Odyssey up in Seattle, and I remember seeing a 25-minute clip of the film, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the film. This is the one film. If I'm going to see any film, it's going to be this one. And so I was like...
Can we quote you?
Well, sure. I mean, but I think it was so I was in Seattle and I was about to move back to California, and y'all were coming to Seattle, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna go see it. And then it was $12, and I didn't have the funds. And then I looked on the website, and I saw you were doing one in Albany, and I was like, perfect. I'll make sure I get here. Totally forgot about it up until like yesterday, and then like I was like, crap, I gotta be there. Come hell or high water, I'm gonna be here.
I'm glad
like,
you're here.
And like I remember back at Gender Odyssey, you had a giant discussion for the like parents and the kids of all of us getting together and being like, hey, like it's hard on you. It's also fucking hard on us. Like it's something that we got to meet some middle ground. Mm-hmm. Like, have you had parents like come to the film being like, oh, whatever, it's not that important, and then at the end being like, holy shit, what am I doing to my child? Yeah. Like, have you had that hard conversation with some parents?
I mean, I think what's been really gratifying is being able to witness so many different experiences, that everybody comes to it with from their own experience, right? From their own experience, either because it's something that reflects their own lives, or even if it doesn't. And in some cases, parents have said, wow, I feel like I really can understand something about my, possibly, not to say this represents anybody else's experience, but potentially about my child's journey that I didn't before. And I've also been really struck by a number of people who are several years into their transition who say, I want to go home and call my mom, because while I was sort of in the early stages of transition, I was really self-focused, which I had to be. It was absolutely the right thing, absolutely essential, but it never occurred to me to think about what was going on for my family or for the people who love me. And now that I'm a little further along and I've got a little more room in my life, I feel like I want to ask them. And so it's been interesting to see that coming from both directions. And to see people who aren't trans, for whom this experience is not a direct reflection of their stories, but who say, this really resonated with me in terms of my relationship with my family, because I wanted something for my life that they didn't want for me, and I wanted their acceptance so badly. And I think for me, I feel like I know that I can see myself in both sides of this relationship, right? I know what it's like to want love and acceptance for the things that I do and who I am from the people I love. But I also know what it's like to try to figure out how to love someone in my life through not understanding them or not agreeing with them. And my guess is that a lot of people have been in maybe both of those situations in their lives with people they love. So to find a place of saying, this is about figuring out how to love whether you understand or not. I don't know, did that answer your question? I'm not sure.
That more than answered my question. Okay. It's also like, I'm so glad to see the full final product, because that 25-minute clip, I was just like, wait, there has to be more. Please tell me there's more. Please tell me that this isn't just like the whole film. I'd be so sad.
Thank you.
But I loved it, and I'm so glad that you're here, and thanks for
I'm
having the filming.
I'm happy to see you again. Yeah, I did 90% of the camera work. Yeah, we had a couple of other awesome people.
I was really curious about the relationship with Dylan. I mean, is that really unique? They were so parallel, and I was thinking how difficult this would be, their transition and the surgery in particular that you focused on would be so difficult for anybody in any circumstance, but to have a close buddy, is that really unique?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I think I can just speak from the perspective of having spent a lot of time with Bennett and Dylan together, is that they are as adorable in real life as they are on screen. They're still very, very close. They're very, very, very close friends. They're brothers. They're, when they were younger, we used to call them litter mates. I don't know how they feel about that, but when we meet Bennett, he's 19, and through 23. He's 24 now. And Dylan is doing great also. He just became an EMT, which is awesome. We're super proud of him. And he's living and working in LA. And yes, I think their friendship was incredibly important to have a reflection of their experience and be able to go through so much of it together was really, really important for both of them, and different from the relationship between Bennett and Joe, which really started out much more as a mentorship relationship. But I thought a lot through making the film and just in my own life about how powerful mentorship or how powerful peer support is, and that we all need it, right? And that Susie and Julie, when you see them, getting support from someone who is your peer and is your friend is really unique. So, yeah.
Did Joe ever talk about the difficulty sort of within the mentorship element of Bennett? Like how maybe Joe still had some like trauma he was working through, and maybe the mentorship with Bennett was bringing that up for him, or was there any sort of on the side conversations of that nature? I found that element of mentorship really interesting as well.
Yeah. Joe and I have talked a lot, both on camera and off camera, about his experience and his life. And I think he's always felt more comfortable in the role of being a mentor rather than being mentored. Maybe that doesn't sound quite right, but he has always loved supporting people, and has really appreciated being able to give. He's a giver. And I know that at different points it was painful for him, in part because Bennett was able to transition several years younger than Joe did. And Joe has said on a number of occasions, I wonder what my life would be like if I hadn't spent those extra years, suffering. If I'd been...
And if Bennett had a Joe. If Joe had a Joe.
If Joe had a Joe, absolutely. And Joe did have... Joe has a very close friend named Amy, who was one of his mentors when he was at a boarding school, and they're still very close. But I think for Joe, being able to give to Bennett something he didn't necessarily have is both really gratifying and also is like, wow, he's doing great. I wonder what I would have been like if I'd been able to do that. And Joe's they're both such deep thinking, deep feeling people. They're very thoughtful about their experiences, which I was really grateful to bear witness to. Yeah.
I wonder how much of this film is spontaneous and how much of it is scripted.
Well, none of it is scripted. None of it is scripted. The only moments when I will ask someone to do something, there are moments where I was like, oh, could you walk through the door again? I didn't get that. So there are moments where, can you hold on a second? Let me come around the other side and get an angle over here, But all of the moments that are interactions, any sort of conversation that people are having, any moment that is an interaction of any kind is all happening in real time. Now, granted, you got 72 minutes out of what was a couple hundred hours. How many hours of footage? A lot of footage. So there's a lot of stuff that was either boring or confusing or not relevant or, or was fantastic but didn't fit the story, right? That's why, as directors, we work with phenomenal editors, because we could not do this on our own. So it looks like, oh, you were there for all the right moments, in part because the editing is selective. But none of that is scripted and none of it is reenacted, save for the occasional, walk through the door, or could you, show me the text you're writing so that I can turn around and see it. Yeah.
How was Bennett able to afford to start the process when he was started getting the hormone shots and that sort of thing? I mean, is that? I mean,
well, he raised.
Who's help? I mean, he raised the money for the surgery, but that beginning piece when they're taking the hormone shots, where did that come from?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. Yeah, I mean, some of it, certainly today, now in California, it is all covered by insurance. When we were first making the film in 2012, that was not necessarily the case, although he has a phenomenal doctor in Los Angeles who does great work down at Children's Hospital, and so that care was more accessible. But today it's in California we have really great access to care, and Kaiser covers top surgery, and it's amazing. We're very, very grateful, and it's super important too right now. And I think it's a moment where people are really nervous about what that means, because it has helped a lot of people access the care that they need, that is life-changing and life-saving. So
We might just have time for a couple more questions.
Did you want to say something, or you were on your way out? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I was just going to ask, what happens next? How do you distribute this?
What happens next? Thank you for asking. It wasn't a plant, I promise. So this film, for the next 6 or 8 months, what we are primarily doing is bringing the film to exactly this type of community, to libraries, schools, high schools, colleges, community centers, faith organizations, whatever it may be, and hopefully not only just me yapping, but we are developing a discussion guide to allow screening hosts to facilitate a conversation after the screening to talk about the issues in the film in a more deep way. So if you know of any place where you think they would appreciate the film and the conversation, we're trying to do that as much as possible. And then in June of 2017, the film will be on slightly shorter version of the film will be on public television on PBS, on Independent Lens, which we're incredibly excited about, which means it'll be very widely accessible. And then it will be available for educational use, and eventually, hopefully, digital and DVD and things like that down the line. But in the short term, if it's something that you're interested in, or you know a school or a community organization that may be interested in bringing the film, we have a bunch of information on our website, which is realboymovie.com. We also have a link to Bennett's music site and Joe's music site and a bunch of other musicians on the website, and links to other fun things. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter, or Instagram, whatever, and you can certainly come talk to me after the screening.
So thank you very much, Shaleece, for bringing us the wonderful film.
Thank
and thank
you.
you, Andy, for joining us.
Andy.
Thanks to all of you for coming and
Thank you.
making this a community event as well.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.